The reactor died quietly. Not with an explosion. Not with fire. Just a long, tired shiver that moved through the floor beneath Scylla's feet. Then silence. The deep hum that had filled the research ship for almost 3 weeks vanished in a single breath, leaving behind a stillness so complete that Scylla could hear her own heartbeat inside her ears. For a moment, nobody moved. The emergency lights flickered on a second later, painting the cabin in cold blue light. Scylla tightened her grip on the navigation console to steady herself as the ship drifted weightless through the dark. Around her, the rest of the crew slowly looked up from their stations. 7 people. 7 scientists alone in a part of space so distant that even the maps had no proper name for it. Captain Darren pushed himself gently away from the rear wall and floated toward the center console. He was old for a howling. The feathers around his neck had faded into silver, and the edges of his grey skin carried the weight of long years spent among stars. But his voice stayed calm. Status. The engineer, Ivan, swallowed hard before answering. The reactor is gone, sir. His hands were shaking. I tried to stabilize it. I tried everything. The asteroid damage was worse than we thought. Captain Darren gave a slow nod. No anger. No panic. Only acceptance. Auxiliary power. 40 hours, Ivan whispered. The bridge became quiet again. Too quiet. Scylla watched Darren carefully, waiting for him to speak. Waiting for some order that could make the fear feel smaller. But the captain only stared. His whole life had been spent studying ancient civilizations and forgotten star paths. He had brought them here searching for ruins left behind by people long gone. Now their own ship was becoming one more ruin drifting through space. At last, he spoke. Send the distress signal again. Ivan looked down. Sir, we've been sending it for 19 days. His voice almost broke. No one answered before. No one is coming. Darren did not raise his voice. Send it again. Ivan obeyed. The signal disappeared into the darkness once more. A tiny voice calling into an endless ocean. Scylla turned back toward her station. Not to check coordinates. Not to scan the stars. Instead, she opened a blank file and began writing a letter to her mother. She knew it would probably never be read. But writing it made the emptiness feel less cold. Hours passed. The ship slowly lost heat. Frost began spreading across the inside edges of the windows like pale veins. The crew gathered together in the center cabin beneath thin emergency blankets, sharing what little warmth they still had. Captain Darren sat among them quietly telling old stories from home. Stories about the first rivers. Stories about the first ships that rose into the sky. His voice was soft and tired, and the others listened the same way children listen before sleep. On the 20th, she had taken another sensor shift because sleep would not come anymore. Her eyes burned from recycled air and exhaustion. She was about to shut the scanner down when a small light appeared at the edge of the screen. Once, she blinked. The dot stayed there. Moving. Fast. Scylla straightened immediately. Her fingers moved across the controls. The signal grew stronger. Captain. Her throat felt dry. She tried again. Captain, I have a contact. Darren reached the console in 3 quick pulls and stared at the display. The others gathered behind him in silence. How far? Half a light minute. Speed. Scylla checked the readings twice because they did not make sense the first time. The engine signature is unknown. Her voice became quieter. It doesn't match any howling ship. She hesitated. And it's moving faster than anything I've ever seen. Nobody spoke. Ivan whispered something under his breath that sounded like a prayer. Another crew member swallowed hard. Pirates. The words spread through the room like cold water. They picked up our distress signal. They waited until we were weak. Captain Darren slowly raised one hand. Silence. Have they hailed us? Scylla opened a channel with trembling hands. She named their ship, their crew, their people. Then she waited. For several long seconds, there was only static. Then the contact changed direction. Not slowing. Not turning away. Coming straight toward them. Fast. Ivan's face turned pale. They aren't answering. His voice cracked. They're charging us. Hold position, Darren said calmly. The unknown ship grew larger on the screen. Scylla switched to visual feed. At first she saw only darkness. Then slowly, something massive appeared against the stars. Her breath caught in her throat. The ship was enormous. Far larger than any vessel she had ever seen before. Howling ships were smooth and elegant, built with soft curves like flowing water. This ship looked nothing like that. It was all hard edges. Heavy armor. Dark metal covered in scars and burn marks from battles long past. The giant vessel slowed as it approached, moving with frightening control. Then finally, a voice came through the speakers. Rough. Calm. Human. Howling vessel, this is Cruiser Bastion. A short pause followed. Are you the ones who called for help? Captain Darren's old hand tightened slightly around the edge of the console. For a brief moment, nobody answered. The crew simply stared at each other, trying to understand what they had just heard. A human ship. Here. In this empty part of space. Darren finally pressed the reply switch. Yes, he said quietly. We are. The giant warship stayed beside them in silence. On the visual screen, Scylla could now see details across its massive hull. Deep scratches cut through layers of armor. Old damage marks had been welded shut with rough lines of dark metal. Near the front of the ship were faded symbols she did not recognize. And moving across the outer hull were already preparing. Then the human voice returned. Howling vessel, we are detecting hull damage and critical life support failure. The voice remained calm and steady. Stay where you are. Rescue teams are on the way. Rescue teams. You heard correctly. A small pause. We are coming aboard to help repair your ship. Ivan floated closer to the captain. His eyes were wide with fear. Sir, we don't know who they are. We know they answered, Darren replied softly. And right now, that is enough. 10 minutes later, the docking alarm sounded. 3 small human shuttles crossed the darkness between the ships in perfect formation. Scylla watched them carefully through the viewport. They moved with the confidence of people who had done this many times before. When the first shuttle locked onto their airlock, the entire ship shook beneath a heavy metallic clang. The crew gathered together in the central cabin. Nobody carried weapons. There was no point. Scylla quietly activated her recorder and slipped it into her pocket. She did not fully understand why. Only that this moment felt important. The inner door slowly opened. A tall figure stepped through first. The human wore grey combat armor from neck to boots, though the helmet rested under one arm instead of covering the face. Scylla stared. The woman looked strange, but not frightening. Pale skin. Brown hair pulled tightly back. Sharp eyes that scanned the room once and somehow noticed everything immediately. Behind her came more humans carrying equipment cases, heaters, medical packs, and sealed containers. I am Captain Vera Hollis of the Cruiser Bastion, the woman said. Her translator flattened some of the who commands this vessel. Captain Darren floated forward. Compared to the human woman, he looked small and fragile. I am Captain Darren of the research vessel Threadlight. He lowered his head respectfully. You answered our call. My crew thanks you. Captain Hollis gave a single nod. No smile. No dramatic speech. Only action. She turned slightly toward her crew. Heaters first. Then, her voice became sharp and efficient. Medical team check everyone for frost exposure. The humans moved instantly. No confusion. No shouting. Each person already knew exactly where to go. Within minutes, warm air began flowing through the freezing cabin. The sudden heat touched Scylla's skin and nearly made her cry. She had forgotten what warmth felt like. One human medic wrapped a thick blanket around Ivan before he could protest. Another handed sealed water containers to the crew. Near the wall, portable heaters hummed softly as frost melted from the metal surfaces. Ivan stared into one of the supply crates in disbelief. Food. Medicine. Clean water. Emergency batteries. Repair tools. Enough supplies to save all of them. You brought all this, he whispered. His eyes lifted slowly toward Captain Hollis. On a warship. The human captain looked genuinely confused by the question. Yes. Ivan frowned. But why? For the first time, Hollis tilted her head slightly. As rescue supplies. No, Ivan said carefully. I mean, your ship is military. We are military. Then why carry all this? Hollis answered immediately. Because someone might need it. The room became quiet again. Ivan looked down at the blanket in his hands as though he no longer understood the universe properly. Captain Darren watched the humans carefully as they worked around his ship. Everywhere he looked, he saw soldiers repairing damage instead of causing it. A human engineer crawled beneath broken panels reconnecting power lines. A medic checked one of the younger crew members for signs of starvation. Another human patched cracks in the cabin wall with quick, practice movements. They moved like people used to saving lives. Not taking them. A few minutes later, one of the engineers returned from the reactor room. She spoke quietly into Hollis's ear. The captain listened without interrupting. Then she turned back toward Darren. Your reactor core is heavily damaged, she explained. We can stabilize it enough to get you home safely, but repairs will take several hours. Darren nodded gratefully. You have already done more than enough. Hollis ignored the comment. In the meantime, some of your crew should come aboard the Bastion. She glanced around at the freezing cabin. We have proper food, medical care, and sleeping quarters available. The crew exchanged uncertain looks. The idea of boarding a human warship felt unreal. Dangerous, even. But Scylla noticed something strange. Not one human aboard the Threadlight had acted with cruelty since arriving. Not one. Captain Darren looked slowly at his exhausted crew. Then toward Scylla. She realized she was staring openly at Captain Hollis with something close to wonder. At last, Darren spoke. Very well. Some of us will come. Hollis nodded once. Bring warm clothing if possible. A tiny hint of humor touched her voice. My ship runs cold for your species. Then she turned and walked back toward the airlock, her heavy boots echoing against the metal floor. The Howing crew watched her leave in silence. For 19 days, they had waited for monsters to find them in the dark. Instead, help had arrived. And somehow that felt even harder to understand. Walking onto the Bastion felt nothing like stepping onto a ship. To Scylla, it felt more like entering the inside of some giant sleeping machine. The corridors were enormous compared to the narrow halls of the Threadlight. Warm yellow lights glowed along the ceiling instead of the pale white lights Howing ships used. A deep vibration moved constantly through the walls and floor beneath her feet. Not rough. Not unpleasant. Just powerful. Like the steady heartbeat of something massive and alive. Scylla walked beside Captain Darren wearing an oversized human coat someone had handed her near the airlock. The sleeves hung far past her hands, but the warmth felt wonderful. The first thing she noticed aboard the Bastion was the smell. Cooked food. Engine oil. Clean metal. Soap. Dozens of unfamiliar scents blending together into something strangely comforting. The second thing she noticed was the noise. Voices echoed through every corridor. Footsteps. Laughter. Someone shouting numbers across a distant hallway. Doors opening and closing. Music playing softly somewhere far deeper inside the ship. Your vessel is very loud, Darren observed carefully. Captain Hollis glanced back at him. For the first time since meeting her, she smiled. It was not a large smile, but it completely changed her face. We are loud people, Captain. There was warmth in her voice now. You get used to it. She led them down another corridor before stopping outside a large open doorway. The mess hall. Scylla stepped inside and froze. The room was enormous. Long tables stretched from one end to the other, filled with humans eating, talking, laughing, drinking. Dozens of them. Some wore combat armor. Others wore grey work uniforms. Several wore white medical coats. There were old humans with tired faces and silver hair. Young humans barely older than children. And then Scylla saw something that shocked her completely. An actual child. A tiny human sat beside a woman eating soup from a bowl almost too large for its hands. Scylla stared. Captain Darren spoke quietly. You bring children aboard a warship. Hollis followed his gaze. Sometimes. She shrugged lightly. Long deployments can last years. Some families stay together when they can. But if battle comes, there are shelter decks deep inside the hull. Her voice remained calm. Safer than most cities back home. Scylla could barely process the idea. A people who carried families onto warships, who built classrooms beside weapon systems. Nothing about humans fit the stories she had heard growing up. They were guided toward a table near the back of the room. Within minutes, human workers arrived carrying trays of food. Fresh bread, warm vegetable soup, small yellow fruits humans called grapes. The smell alone nearly overwhelmed Scylla. The howling crew began eating slowly at first. Then faster. Much faster. None of them had tasted real food in weeks. A large human wearing a stained kitchen apron approached their table carrying another tray. His thick arms were covered with old burn scars. When he smiled, his entire beard moved with it. He placed a small plate in front of Scylla. 3 yellow grapes rested carefully on it. For the little one, he said in rough trade speech. You look like you need sweet things. Scylla blinked in surprise. She was not little. She was a fully trained navigator. But there was no insult in the man's voice. Only kindness. Quietly, she lowered her head in thanks. The cook laughed warmly and walked away toward another table. Across from her, Captain Darren watched everything with the eyes of a historian seeing a new world open in front of him. Nothing matched the records. Nothing matched the warnings. These humans lived inside a machine built for war. Yet every hallway carried signs of ordinary life. Families. Music. Warm meals. Laughter. It made no sense. After the meal, Captain Hollis guided them through several parts of the ship. They passed the medical bay where doctors treated injured crew members with calm efficiency. One soldier sat laughing while a medic wrapped his wrist. Another human lay sleeping peacefully while machines monitored breathing and heartbeat. Further down, Hollis showed them the engineering deck. Scylla stopped moving the moment the reactor chamber doors opened. The room was gigantic. A towering column of blue-white energy burned inside layers of armored containment rings. Human engineers moved around it like tiny figures around a star. Ivan stared in complete silence. His mouth remained slightly open. You could power a city with this, he whispered. One of the engineers overheard him. We do. The human grinned before returning to work. Later, Hollis led them toward a quiet chamber near the front of the ship. This room was different. No laughter. No conversation. The walls were covered with photographs. Hundreds of them. Faces. Names. Dates. Humans. Aliens. Entire families. Some smiling. Some wearing uniforms. Some holding children. Captain Hollis stopped beside the nearest wall. These are the people we lost. Her voice had become softer now. Crew members. Civilians. Allies. She looked slowly across the room. People we tried to save. Silence filled the chamber. Captain Darren stepped closer to the photographs. His old eyes moved carefully from face to face. Then he stopped. There, near the center wall, were symbols from the Howling language. His breath caught slightly. You lost Howling. 3, Hollis answered quietly. A merchant family. Her eyes remained fixed ahead. Pirates reached them first. We arrived 2 hours too late. She said it simply. No dramatic sadness. No attempt to hide the pain either. But Scylla noticed the way Hollis's fingers brushed briefly against the wall before she turned away. Like someone touching an old wound. Later that evening, they returned to the mess hall. Most of the room had grown quieter now. Some humans were ending their shifts. Others sat drinking while soft music played from hidden speakers somewhere overhead. Scylla finally asked the question that had been growing inside her since boarding the Bastion. Captain Hollis. The human looked up from her cup. Yes. Scylla hesitated carefully. Why do you do this? Hollis remained silent. Scylla continued. Your ship was built for war. Your people are soldiers. She glanced around the crowded hall. So why travel so far just to save strangers? For several long seconds, Hollis did not answer. Then slowly, she set down her cup. A long time ago, she said quietly, humans believed we were alone in the universe. The noise of the mess hall faded around them. When we finally reached the stars, we were afraid. A faint smile touched her face. We expected enemies. Her eyes lifted toward Scylla. And we found some. The smile disappeared again. But we also found frightened people with nobody coming to help them. She folded her hands together. We remember what it feels like to be alone in the dark. The room stayed completely still around the table. So we made a decision. Her voice was calm. If someone calls for help, and we can answer. She paused. Then we answer. Scylla memorized every word. Later that night, alone inside her borrowed cabin, she recorded the conversation into her memory crystal word for word. She did not know yet that the night was far from over. She did not know alarms would soon echo across the bastion. Or that she was about to see why the humans built ships like this in the first place. The alarm did not sound the way Scylla expected. There was no screaming siren. No sharp panic filling the halls. Instead, 3 deep tones rolled softly through the ship. Calm. Steady. Almost gentle. Then a woman's voice spoke across the speakers. All hands, battle stations. A short pause followed. Repeat. All hands, battle stations. Scylla sat upright immediately on the edge of her borrowed bunk. Across the small cabin, Captain Darren opened his eyes slowly from sleep. Neither of them spoke. The calmness of the alarm frightened Scylla more than panic would have. Outside the room, the bastion had already changed. The warm yellow lighting had shifted into soft red. Humans moved quickly through the corridors. But nobody ran. Nobody shouted. Nobody looked afraid. A medic passed carrying equipment with one hand while guiding a sleepy child with the other. An engineer jogged past tightening gloves onto grease-covered fingers. Young soldiers walked toward their stations while fastening armor plates calmly into place. The entire ship moved with frightening discipline. Not chaos. Routine. Like this was something they had done many times before. An officer noticed the Howings standing in the doorway. Captain Hollis says you may remain guests on the bridge if you wish. He pointed farther down the corridor. Or shelter decks are open. Captain Darren answered immediately. The bridge. The officer nodded once. This way. They followed him through several corridors before entering a wide lift that carried them upward through the ship. When the doors opened, Scylla stepped onto the bastion's bridge for the first time. The room was massive. Half-circle shaped. Filled with glowing screens and silent crew members working at their stations beneath dark red lights. At the center stood Captain Hollis. Gone was the grey coat. Now she wore a darker combat uniform, sleeves tied at the wrists, hair tied back cleanly. She did not turn when they entered. Captain Darren, she said calmly. You may want to hold onto something. The main screen displayed 3 red contacts moving rapidly through space. Enemy ships. One of the human officers looked up from his station. Hail incoming. Audio only, Hollis replied. A harsh clicking voice filled the bridge. The translator struggled for a moment before the meaning became clear. Human cruiser. This is Captain Hask of the Kreven Free Fleet. Scylla felt cold immediately. The Kreven. Even hearing the name made her stomach tighten. Everyone in civilized space knew their reputation. Slavers, raiders, predators who hunted distress signals like animals hunting wounded prey. The alien voice continued. The Howing vessel and crew are claimed property under salvage law. The clicking laughter that followed sounded terrible through the speakers. Withdraw now and we will not consider humans part of this dispute. Silence. The human crew did not react. No fear. No anger. Every eye slowly turned. The human captain rested both hands calmly on the edge of her command station. Then she answered. The Howing vessel is not salvage. Her voice remained perfectly steady. Their crew are not property. They asked for help. We answered. Another short pause followed. That is the entire matter. The Kreven captain laughed again. Human. You have one ship. The 3 red marks spread wider across the tactical display. We have 3. Scylla felt her chest tighten as the enemy formation shifted around them like wolves circling prey. You will lose this fight badly. The Kreven voice sharpened. The Howing are not worth dying for. For the first time, Captain Hollis slowly raised her eyes toward the main screen. Her expression never changed. You said something important just now. The bridge became even quieter. You called my passengers worthless. Her voice stayed calm. And you said it on an open channel. She straightened slightly. So now I'm going to answer on the same channel. Every human on the bridge listened silently. We came because someone needed help. A small pause. And we do not leave people behind simply because dangerous men arrive afterward. The final words came cold and steady. That is not how humans are built. Then she closed the channel. No dramatic motion. Just one finger touching the console. Immediately, her attention returned to the bridge crew. Battle station confirmed. Forward shields online. Online and stable. Main guns charged. Ready. Hollis nodded once. Helm. Yes, Captain. Put us between the Kreven and the Threadlight. The giant warship began to move. Scylla felt the engine's wake beneath her feet like thunder buried deep inside metal. The entire bridge vibrated softly. Captain Darren stepped closer to Hollis. There are 3 enemy ships, he said quietly. You cannot fight them alone. Hollis looked at him for a moment. For the first time since meeting her, Scylla saw exhaustion hiding behind the human captain's eyes. But there was something else too. Certainty. If we leave, Hollis said softly, they'll hunt your people the moment we turn away. Her gaze shifted briefly toward the screen. They already decided your crew belongs to them. She looked back at Darren. The only way to keep you safe is to make sure they cannot follow. The old howling captain had no answer. Hollis gave him a faint smile. Navigator should hold onto the rail. Scylla blinked. What? This next part gets loud. The enemy ships suddenly split apart across the display. One moved high. One low. The third accelerated straight toward them. Scylla barely had time to breathe before the Bastion fired first. The sound was not loud. It was worse. A deep pulse slammed through the ship beneath her feet like the heartbeat of some enormous beast. On the main screen, a beam of white light crossed the darkness instantly. The lead Kreven ship erupted in red energy as shields absorbed the impact. Direct hit, one officer called out. Enemy shields reduced to 70%. Again, Hollis ordered immediately. The Bastion fired a second time before the enemy formation fully reacted. Scylla realized something terrifying then. Humans did not hesitate in battle. The moment talking ended, they attacked with everything they had. No warnings. No testing. No fear. The Kreven ships answered with a storm of bright weapons fire. Explosions flashed across the Bastion's shields like violent rain. The bridge shook hard enough to throw Scylla sideways against the railing. Warning lights flashed briefly overhead. But the human crew stayed calm. Focused. One enemy vessel broke away toward the Bastion side while another dove lower beneath them. A trapping maneuver. Clearly practiced many times before. Captain Hollis watched the enemy movements silently for only a second. Then she spoke. Hard turn to port. One officer hesitated. Captain, that exposes our flank. I know. Her voice stayed level. Do it. The Bastion turned violently. Not gracefully. Not smoothly. The entire warship twisted like an angry animal. Scylla nearly lost her grip as gravity slammed sideways across the bridge. Metal groaned around them. Engines screamed. Then the side of the Bastion exploded with fire. Rows of hidden cannons opened along the hull all at once. The broadside struck the second Kreven ship head-on. Enemy shields shattered instantly. Armor plates tore apart into spinning debris. Flames and atmosphere burst into space from massive wounds across the enemy hull. Second contact crippled, a gunner shouted. For the first time, cheers started rising across parts of the bridge. Captain Hollis silenced them with one raised hand. Watch the third ship. Right on cue, the remaining enemy vessel slammed heavy fire into the Bastion's exposed side. The bridge lights flickered violently. One console exploded in sparks near the rear station. A human officer cried out, clutching a burned arm. Before anyone ordered it, a medic appeared instantly beside her. Damage report, Hollis said. Flank shields at 40%. Hull stable. No major breaches. Hollis nodded once. Bring us around. The Bastion turned again. Slower this time. Heavy. Relentless. The final Krevan ship tried to retreat. Too late. The Bastion's main gun fired once. A brilliant white beam crossed the darkness. The enemy engine section vanished instantly. The second shot tore directly through the center of the ship. The Krevan vessel did not explode. It simply broke apart slowly into two burning halves, drifting silently into space. Scylla stared at the screen in horror. Even slavers were still living beings. She felt no triumph, only a heavy sadness inside her chest. Then the remaining Krevan ship opened another desperate transmission. Human vessel. Stop firing. The clicking voice sounded frightened now. We withdraw. Captain Hollis stared at the tactical display. You are not withdrawing. Her voice remained calm. You are running. The enemy captain sounded almost desperate. There is no need for further bloodshed. Hollis answered immediately. You came here hunting helpless people. The bridge stayed silent around her. You do not get mercy simply because the fight became difficult. Suddenly, the final Krevan ship began charging jump engines. Scylla recognized the energy pattern instantly. They're trying to escape. Not today, Hollis said quietly. The Bastion fired one final shot. Perfectly aimed. The enemy jump drive shattered before activation finished. The Krevan vessel spun helplessly through the dark trailing broken metal and leaking atmosphere. Then silence returned. One by one, the human officers began reporting. All hostile contacts neutralized. Minor damage across outer hull. Small fires contained. No fatalities. Captain Hollis finally exhaled slowly. Her shoulders lowered for the first time since the battle began. Then she gave the order that shocked Scylla most of all. Prepare rescue teams. Several officers looked up briefly. Hollis kept her eyes on the ruined enemy ships. We recover survivors from every vessel. A short pause followed. No one dies tonight who doesn't have to. 6 hours after the battle ended, the threadlight was alive again. Warm air moved through the corridors. Lights glowed steadily across the walls. The patched reactor hummed with weak but stable power deep inside the ship. Human engineers had repaired just enough to get them safely home. Scylla stood alone in her small cabin and rested one hand against the metal wall. For the first time in many days, the ship no longer felt like a tomb drifting through space. Outside in engineering, Ivan was still speaking excitedly with a young human technician named Ray. The two of them had spent the entire morning beside the damaged reactor. Ray patiently explained every repair step twice while Ivan filled pages of notes with almost desperate focus. Every few minutes, Ivan asked another question. Every time, the human answered. No arrogance. No mockery. Just help. Farther down the corridor, Captain Darren walked slowly beside Captain Hollis. The old Howing looked deep in thought. Not like a man preparing to leave. Like a man trying to understand something that had changed him forever. Back in her cabin, Scylla looked down at the small recorder resting beside her console. It was full now. Hours and hours of recordings. The rescue. The mess hall. The memorial wall. The battle. The human medics treating injured Krevan prisoners with the same care they gave their own people. Scylla carefully transferred every file into a memory crystal. A Howing crystal was meant for important things. History. Truth. Things too valuable to lose. When the transfer finished, the crystal glowed softly in her palm. Inside it was proof that the stories about humans were wrong. Not all of them, but enough. An hour later, Scylla found Captain Hollis standing near the main airlock between the two ships. The human captain had changed out of her battle uniform. She wore the grey coat again, sleeves rolled back loosely at the wrists. One engineer handed her a repair report before moving away down the corridor. When Hollis noticed Scylla approaching, she gave a small nod. Navigator. Scylla stepped closer and held out the memory crystal carefully. I want you to have this. Hollis accepted it gently. She turned the glowing crystal slowly between her fingers. What is it? Everything, Scylla answered softly. Everything I saw here. Hollis looked back up at her. My people have heard stories about humans for many years, Scylla continued. Most of those stories are wrong. Her voice grew quieter. They won't believe me when I return home. She glanced toward the crystal. But they will believe this. For a long moment, Hollis said nothing. Then finally she spoke. You don't owe us anything. Scylla shook her head lightly. I know. A small smile appeared on her face. That's why this matters. The human captain closed her fingers carefully around the crystal like it was something fragile and alive. I'll keep it safe, she promised. And I'll make sure it reaches the right people. Scylla lowered her head in a formal howling bow. Awkwardly, Hollis copied the movement as best she could. The attempt made Scylla smile for real this time. A few minutes later, Captain Darren arrived. He stood before Hollis silently for several seconds. The two captains simply looked at each other across the airlock. Finally, Darren spoke. I spent my entire life studying civilizations. His old voice carried softly through the corridor. I believed I understood war. He paused. And kindness. A sad smile touched his face. I thought the two could never exist together. Hollis listened quietly. Darren looked around the bastion one final time. At my age, it is uncomfortable discovering you were wrong about something important. Hollis smiled faintly. You don't owe us anything either, Captain. Darren gave a quiet laugh. I know. He looked directly at her. That is the part one cannot stop thinking about. Slowly, the two captains reached forward and shook hands. Human style. Palm against palm. Then it was time to leave. The howling crew crossed back onto the threadlight while human engineers completed final departure checks. A little while later, the damaged research ship slowly pulled away from the bastion. The massive cruiser stayed nearby, escorting them silently through deep space. For 2 full days, the human warship remained beside them. Watching. Guarding. Like an older sibling walking beside someone smaller through dangerous streets. Then finally, howling territory appeared on long-range sensors. Safe space. Home. One final signal came from the bastion. Threadlight, this is Cruiser Bastion. Captain Hollis's voice filled the bridge softly. You are safely home now. A brief pause followed. Travel well. Then the transmission ended. The great warship turned slowly away from them and disappeared back into the darkness between stars. Gone as quietly as it had arrived. Captain Darren gave his report to the Howling Council 3 weeks later. For 3 straight hours, he spoke without stopping. He told them everything. The rescue. The battle. The families aboard the bastion. The memorial wall. The human medics treating enemy survivors. And finally, he played Scylla's crystal before the entire council chamber. The room remained silent long after the final recording ended. In the months that followed, changes slowly spread through the Howling worlds. Trade routes opened toward human territory. Old laws were rewritten. Diplomatic ships traveled farther than ever before. But the most important change happened quietly. Far away from governments and councils. Among smaller species scattered across distant systems. Among traders. Miners. Lonely travelers moving through dangerous regions of space without fleets to protect them. A message began spreading from ship to ship. Passed through recordings. Copied through whispers. Shared between strangers in dark stations and distant ports. The message was simple. If you are lost. If you are alone. If the darkness is closing around you and nobody else comes. Send the signal anyway. Send it clearly. Do not be afraid. Because somewhere in the dark, humans are listening. And if they hear you, they will come.